Hey everybody, Daniel here, back to you with a video that I've been wanting to do for a long time. You know, no matter what fandom you're a part of, I believe arguments are an inevitability. Heck, I even believe that spirited discussion can be healthy to a certain extent. That being said, when you're in as many fan groups as I am, the same arguments happening again and again and again can get a little tiring, especially when they've already been addressed before. Even more so when it's to the same people. Now, I try to approach arguments in good faith because not everyone has the time to consume every ounce of media that's out there, let alone the amount of Superman comics that I read. Even so, there are a few arguments that cause Superman fans like me to roll our eyes because they're brought up again and again and again. And when you add versus battles into the mix, it gets even worse. So I've put together a nice little list of arguments that I'm personally tired of, that I'm going to go ahead and address because the fanboy in me won't let me not do it one last time. Just a few quick notes. First and foremost, if you've ever used any of these arguments, I am not saying you are stupid or a bad person or anything like that. Like I said, I try to assume everything in good faith. It's just that I and many other fans have been talking about these points for so long that sometimes it's harder to assume good faith and we get a little tired of seeing them. And that's mostly our issue to deal with. Second, this list is in no particular order. These aren't ranked best to worst or tiered or anything like that as to how sick I am of them waxes and wanes. And lastly, while many of them are versus battle related, they aren't all, as some discussions I'm sick of happen within the Superman community itself. What are they? You'll just have to stick around and watch the video. Argument number 1, Lynx versus Battles Wiki. I want you to picture this. You're in a versus discussion group on, say, Facebook, and somebody poses the question of Superman versus, I don't know, Archie Sonic. You go through the painstaking process of listing out all the reasons you think maybe Superman takes this fight. You provide scans, you provide the necessary context of said scans. You list out all the pros and the cons. You're trying to be polite. And somebody responds to you with, wank. Here's a link to the Versus Battle Wiki's article. Look, I am not here to crap on a community. Wikis can be very helpful for quick summaries of characters, their power sets, and can even help people understand ballparks of their power. But they in themselves are not arguments. I used to be a member of that site, and when I was, getting a comic book character and upgrade was like pulling teeth and required votes. So if a community doesn't like a character by and large, then any number of examples was just never enough, at least when I was there. It doesn't help that their quality of Superman pages can change very drastically. When I was just there not too long ago, they still had Superman in the range of star level, solar system level, and now they have them somewhere in the multiversal range. This often leads to notable wins and losses being discarded after a lot of discussion. And between us friends, this becomes especially egregious when the person linking me the article is the one who started the thread in the first place. It just shows that they were never actually interested in a discussion. Argument number 2. If X character had Kryptonite, then they would win. Kryptonite. The classic weakness that was invented to give a radio star a break, and the tried and true I want Superman to lose tool. Jokes aside, I do understand why this one is brought up all the time. After all, it is the quintessential Superman weakness. It's basically tied to his character at this point. And I see it brought into character matchups, especially with scientists like Superman versus Iron Man, where people insist if Tony had knowledge of kryptonite, then he would automatically win. My issue with this argument is twofold. One, why would you only give one of the characters in the discussion out-of-universe knowledge just so they have an edge? It's sort of telling and should really answer the question at hand already. My second issue is I find the argument to be a little bit lazy, and it forces both of us to ignore characters that have used kryptonite against Superman, but still lost. Characters like Lex Luthor, Metallo, Titano, Conduit, Doomsday, Kryptonite Man, Bloodsport, and the GD Batman. Yes, Superman has lost to kryptonite, of course he has. But let's not pretend like there aren't plenty of examples of him working around it, especially against people with far more experience using it against him. In my opinion, this complicates arguments for people because now they're stuck in a position where they have to explain why all those characters lost with the magic bullet, but theirs doesn't. And the argument almost always falls back on plot-induced stupidity, but how many times can you really get away with saying that? Argument number 3. The evil Superman would always beat the original in a fight. Hey now, stop me if you've heard this one. Homelander and Omni-Man would wreck Superman because they're the Superman that don't hold back. I typically hear this argument from people who don't read a lot of comics, or their idea of Superman's power comes from media that is not comics. This is usually dispelled by taking even a mid-range feat from Superman and comparing it to what the character in question has done, but I'll do you one argument better. Normally, I'd hate using the same gag in one video, but here's a brief list of evil Supermen that Superman has beat in canon. General Zod, Bizarro, Ultraman, Cyborg Superman, Hiel, Ulysses, the Eradicator, Prius, and Jax And really, those are just the more well-known examples, the ones that are easier to talk about. The evil Superman argument has long stopped holding any water for me. Argument number 4. That's an outlier. This one's pretty brief. No, I'm not saying outliers don't exist for Superman. I'm just tired of people talking past each other when discussing a character and their feats. It can be especially annoying when people use the term anti-feats as if that really means something, and not all characters have high ends and low ends. For me, I'd rather hear why you don't like a feat or you don't think it fits instead of being very dismissive with your attitude. It's just kind of annoying to me. Argument number 5. Superman is a brute / can't fight. Look, I have a whole video coming out addressing this topic that's only 2 months late. Sorry, the Just Hands video for Superman is coming. That is going to discuss the variety of fighting styles he's been trained in, how he can employ them. Short version, Superman is a super genius with a variety of training and is a creative and strategic fighter that somehow got labeled the Unga Bunga Me Punch hero. I blame Frank Miller. Speaking of... Argument 6. Ex-writer ruined Superman. Now, everyone has their least favorite take on the character. For Twitter, it seems to be John Byrne. If you ask Reddit, it's probably Zack Snyder. A lot of criticisms are thrown Frank Miller's way as well, and if you ask me, I'd probably say Bendis or Tom Taylor are my least favorites. But hyperbole and my fanboy whining aside, I don't think any of them ruined Superman or damaged the perception of him in the public zeitgeist. Not permanently, anyway. And that's because the character is just bigger than all of them. I am all for discussing what I like and don't like in individual books. Hashtag justice for John Kent. And I'm even more than willing to discuss what I may or may not like from a certain individual's writing. That being said, I do find some of the reactions in the Superman fandom to be a little bit overzealous. And I'm just kind of sick of the back and forth over, which one of these guys created the definitive Superman or who ruined Superman, whose reboot was the worst. It's all just become exhausting and I'm just tired of talking about it. Argument number 7. Clark/Superman is the mask. This argument seemed to be especially prevalent on Twitter with a lot of bullheaded back and forths, with one side claiming that Kal-El is his truest self, embracing his alien heritage, and the other side pointing out that Clark was raised by 2 humble farmers and that is what shaped his personality. It is the ultimate nature versus nurture question, and it used to be my favorite thing to discuss about the character. So why am I sick of it? For that, you'll have to refer to my previous argument about writers. It's all been done. Legends like Grant Morrison have had Clark feign mild-mannered behaviors and a hunched-over mockery of weakness, while someone like Geoff Johns has embraced the influence an adoptive family can give you. And I believe both writers have done the inverse, sometimes in the same story. Now, I do believe it is okay to have a preference for this. Me personally, I love just portraying Superman as a goober all around. I think it's one of the things that My Adventures with Superman does really well. I just get a little tired of how people try to put a definitive nail on this topic. I really do hate to get overly philosophical on y'all, but this is just sort of the way that modern mythologies work. Characters evolve over time, depending on who's in the driver's seat, and our expectations for them change over time, and sometimes it goes back and forth. And for the most part, I believe it's best when both of these are simultaneously true. I hate sounding like a know-it-all grandpa, but people and characters often have layers. Superman is no different. We wear masks for different situations and we evolve over time. Sometimes being Superman all the time would drive him crazy. Other times it's him embracing his heritage. And sometimes the only people who see a difference are those projecting their expectations onto the character. Almost all of these stories serve a purpose, and I think each of them serve the character well in their own way. And with that, we finally come to Argument 8. Superman is boring. Everyone has heard this one. My mother has heard this one. Superman is boring because he is too powerful. Superman is boring because he's too good. Superman is boring because his powers are too generic. Superman is boring because he's too prevalent. I used to try to convince people otherwise. I really just wanted them to see what I saw in the character. A character that gave me hope when I was in a very low point in my life. A character with a diverse rogues gallery. A character with just as many diverse and unique writers. And a character with so many fun and compelling stories. I even loved his overpowered nature. Yes, it's a power fantasy, but it made discussing what characters could beat him or how they might do it more interesting to me. It can be disheartening to hear this argument come up again and again and again and again and again, especially when it's coming from people who have clearly not read many of his books, if any at all. My advice? Put yourself together a nice little recommended reading list, give it to those that seem interested, and then walk away. After all, if people can't be bothered to read the stories of feats they're trying to debunk, what makes you think they're going to dive into the books to see what the character is really all about? If you enjoyed your time here, why don't you go ahead and check out some of the other videos I've made? I do have a few on Superman after all. And if they seem like your jam, why not go ahead and subscribe and let me know what else you'd like to see. Anyway, that's been Daniel with Truth, Justice, and all of that nonsense. I'll catch you next time.